Alright, here we go again. Normally when Genesius releases a video about something dumb, I just kind of ignore it, but this time he chose to call me out specifically for some reason, so I feel obligated to make a response. I was tempted to try and remorselessly demolish him and everything he said in the video, which would have probably turned this into a 20-minute rant, but instead, I'm going to try to be a little more gentle and brief. Okay, so a few days ago, Genesius Wolf, Catholic furry YouTuber, released a video called Yif Kills Love. I'm not going to do the normal thing of listening to it for a few seconds at a time and then responding to each section because, frankly, I find that format kind of boring. Instead, I want you all to pause this, go ahead and watch his video, and then come back. Alright, good? Okay, so Genesius claims in his video that looking at pornography, specifically Yif, makes you a bad person and will destroy your life. He raises several terrible arguments to prove his point. Instead of really going after Genesius specifically, I want to use this as a way to show how to not make arguments. He has three main points he wants to disprove, and this is a screen cap of his video, so any errors are his, not mine. 1. Yif is common in the fandom. If it's common in the fandom, then it's acceptable and not deserving of shame. Therefore, Yif is acceptable and not deserving of shame. 2. Satisfaction of Yif is the common sentiment of furries. Many, if not most furries, believe that porn does not harm them. Therefore, satisfaction is the source of the sentiment that porn does not harm them. 3. Violent fetishes do not encourage viewers to commit the acts in the porn/Yif. This is because such acts do not psychologically influence the viewer enough. Therefore, viewership of such violent fetishes do not affect the viewer. Now, the premise of this video pretty much falls apart before it even begins, and here's why. While Genesius presents these arguments as things furries have said to him, and he specifically says, I said them, I didn't. And I doubt that anyone else did either. So Genesius attacking these arguments means nothing, because no one is making these arguments. We can analyze each of them to show just how poorly constructed they are and why no one would actually say these things. First one, abridged, Yif is common in the fandom, therefore acceptable and not deserving of shame. So first and foremost, this is written in such a way that it's not entirely clear what the argument even is. Is it saying that because Yif is common, most furries won't shame you for liking it, or is it saying that because it's common, that means it's good for you? See, the first one is pretty much a fact. Most furries are into Yif to some degree, and you see very little shaming of those who are interested in it, outside of very extreme fetishes. And the latter possible meaning of this argument is a very obvious logical fallacy that no one would make. Now, in his video, Genesius points out that it's a logical fallacy and therefore false, which, like I said, is true, but ultimately meaningless because no one other than Genesius made that argument in the first place. This is basically the equivalent of making a papier-mâché boulder, lifting it over your head and proclaiming, "Look at me, look how strong I am." Well, it certainly looks impressive from far away, but it's not a real boulder. It's not a real argument. It's just a wad of paper that you made. A flimsy argument that you could easily topple. Second argument, once again abridged. Most furries like Yif and believe it doesn't harm them, therefore their like of Yif is the reason they think it doesn't harm them. Once again, an argument that no one has made because it's an easily defeated logical fallacy. It actually doesn't even logically follow as an argument. The reason that most furries think Yif doesn't harm them isn't because they like it, it's because it hasn't harmed them. If anything, this argument should be, furries don't think Yif is harmful because it hasn't harmed them, but then it wouldn't be so easy to knock down, which is why you didn't use it. Third argument Genesius tries to disprove. Playing violent video games doesn't make you violent. Watching violent porn doesn't make you violent. Oh, wait, that's not... Yes, this is actually his argument. Watching violent porn makes you violent. First of all, what does that even mean? Violent porn? Are we still talking about Yif? We're talking about cartoon violence here? Is that what you're saying makes people violent? Adults, right? Okay, anyway. This argument is the only one that sounds like something I've actually said, so congratulations on getting 1 out of 3 right. Now, what I did say was something along the lines of, I don't believe that playing violent games makes you violent, and I don't believe that watching porn makes you commit sex crimes. Nothing makes you do anything, and I think that most people are able to differentiate between fantasy and reality. After all, we are talking about Yif, right? Yif is even further separated from reality than typical porn is. Now, Genesius goes on to list a bunch of reasons why looking at porn makes you a bad person, stating things like it causes you to be dumber, it changes your sexual taste for the worst, it increases infidelity and divorce rates. He claims that all of this information comes from credible sources, which he links in the description. So, let's have a look at those sources. If his sources are indeed credible, then maybe he has a point. Otherwise, what he says holds no ground. The first one is a video from the site Fight the New Drug, and we'll talk about them later. No actual sources are listed for this video, and the comments are disabled. Now, I only bring that up because usually disabling comments is done if the poster of the video knows it's a bunch of bullshit. Second source, a TED Talk. You know, the pinnacle of scientific study. This one is purely anecdotal, and the guy sounds kind of like a lunatic. He spends a solid 2 minutes talking about how porn is bad because no one uses hands, and that's just awful because he likes caressing. I'm not actually sure why you included this one at all. Regardless, no sources, comments disabled. Are you seeing a pattern here? Third source, another TED Talk. Porn causes violence and rape and something about misogyny. No sources. Oh, look, the comments are actually enabled on this one. And what's this? Near the top of those comments, an actual scientific article disproving some of the things in the video. Astounding. Next one, another link to Fight the New Drug. Now, like I said, we'll talk about these guys later, but for now, we can see that, lo and behold, there are some sources to what might actually be scientific articles. So, good job. Next, an article by some conservative Christian-funded radio station, so you know they don't have any kind of agenda, with no sources. Next, an anonymous anecdote from a woman who blames porn on the reason her husband left her. I'm seriously confused as to why you thought this was a good source. Next, a document about the negative effects pornography has on children. While it does list sources, many of them are sketchy, either giving me a 4 of 4 or links to other articles by Christian groups. The site itself is funded by conservatives, which makes me kind of hesitant to believe that it's credible. Regardless, this article is about the effects of pornography on children and isn't really relevant to your video, which seems to be focused on adults and adult relationships. And besides, no one is making the argument that porn is somehow good for children anyway. Finally, the last source you listed is an article that actually disproves some of the things that you're saying in your video, which makes me wonder if you actually even read it. But there's no sources listed for any of the things they're saying, so we'll just ignore it like the rest. So that leaves you with one source that is relevant to your argument that has any merit to it. It makes me wonder why you included these other sources to begin with. Why the TED Talks? Why the anecdote about the woman mad that her husband left her? It makes me think that maybe you knew that you only had one source and you felt you had to pad it out a bit so it didn't look like you weren't just blindly following what this one website says, which is exactly what you were doing. And let's talk about this website, Fight the New Drug. Now, other than trying to get me to donate money or buy t-shirts, this site basically lists all the evils of looking at porn. The site itself claims to be non-religious, but I immediately suspected otherwise because no one else would do this. And my guess would be non-denominational Protestant. They're usually the, yeah man, fight the power, loving Jesus is cool, yo, type of people. Yet a quick Google search shows that I was wrong. It was actually founded and is run by Mormons. Oh. So much for non-religious group. Reading about them a little more, their views and science related to pornography has come under quite a bit of scrutiny. They've been heavily criticized, and many scientists have publicly stated that most of what Fight the New Drug says is complete and utter bullshit. And look at that. Sources. So, there you have it. Genesius's argument fails on basically every level. He sets up flimsy counter-arguments specifically so he can knock them down, and fails to provide even one credible source to corroborate anything that he's saying. Genesius. Shortly after you posted this video, I contacted you and told you that if I did make a response, I'd try to explain to you why your religious, moral objectivist worldview gets in the way of you creating good arguments. So I'm going to do that. I'm not trying to be mean and I'm not trying to bash your religion, I'm just going to tell you what I think. Despite your stated desire to form arguments from a secular point of view, you still create them from a top-down perspective. That is, you are already sure of an opinion you want to have, and then you look for evidence to support that opinion. This is something that most religious people do because they regard God as the ultimate truth and authority. In short, if God says something, it must be true, and it's your job to find evidence to support that truth. You were struggling with pornography addiction, as you stated in your video. You knew it was causing you problems and that it was bad. And if it was causing you problems, then it is bad. For you. You saw the Fight the New Drug t-shirts and website and got it in your mind that pornography is bad for everyone, not just you. Then you set out to build a case to support that conclusion. From the sources you provided, I already know that you either didn't try very hard, or you just couldn't actually find anything substantial to corroborate the information on Fight the New Drug. Instead of addressing actual counter-arguments that you knew you couldn't disprove, you made up flimsy, fake counter-arguments that no one has actually ever made. That way you could knock them down and it would lend authenticity to your conclusion. This is the opposite of how you make a good argument. Good arguments start at the bottom and work their way up to a conclusion. For example, when I watched your video, I didn't like it, but I didn't automatically assume everything you were saying was false. Instead, I looked at your own sources to see if they were legitimate. If I had found them to be credible, then my conclusion would have been that you were right and this would be a very different video. I start at the bottom, look at the evidence, and then form a conclusion, not the other way around. Look, I understand that you were struggling and maybe still struggle with porn addiction. I also understand that you deeply believe in your religion, which condemns pornography. I'm not going to say that porn can never be bad. I very well know it can be addicting and it can be harmful to some people, just like any number of other things. I'm glad that you are trying to overcome your addiction. You are totally free to have your own opinions on porn, but what I ask is that you don't try to push it on others. You need to understand that not everyone suffers from porn in the same way that you do. In fact, many people benefit from porn, or specifically YIF, in the furry community. Furries are a very art-centric subculture. I personally can tell you that many of the friends I have I found through porn or porn-sharing sites. Sharing YIF is a social event for myself and many of my friends. It's helped me to learn to write. It's helped me to express myself and find my own sexual identity. And it's even helped me in my YouTube career. Some of my followers found my channel through ads I posted on E621. Porn is not a universally good or bad thing, but everything should be taken in moderation and everyone experiences things differently. I don't have any hard feelings toward you, Genesius, but please, in the future, don't tell people I said things that I didn't actually say. Anyway, I'm Cothrix, and you have a wonderful day. Hey everyone, this is just a reminder that I do gameplay streams on Twitch every weekday at 9 PM to 1 AM Eastern. And if you want to get a hold of me, the best way is through Twitter. DMs are always open. Finally, I want to thank everyone who supports me on Patreon and Twitch. You make all of this possible.